Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our spring business webinar series. This is the first of 3 or 4 that we will be doing this spring. And we're really pleased to have Peter Thelen with Thelen Financial Inc. joining us today with his topic, doing business in an inflationary environment. It's an interesting time we're living in. Many of you know Peter. He was for many years worked with Landmark Landscapes and recently started his own firm. So we're real happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Mary Kay. I appreciate you guys having me here. All right, so like Mary Kay said, I'm going to run through my presentation, and then towards the end, I'll have a little time for questions if you have any. I'll try my best to answer them. If not, I'll circle back with you in an email, and yeah, we'll rock and roll. So thank you, Mary Kay, and all the Urban Ag staff for setting this up. It's truly an honor to be able to come here and talk to you guys. Like Mary Kay said, I've been around the Urban Ag for a little over 9 years now. Spent some time over at Landmark, and according to an SBA stat recently, more than half of all Americans are employed by small business owners in industries like the landscape industry and various other service-based industries. So, you guys are employing more than half of the U.S. workforce. So that's pretty awesome. So I know you guys' time's valuable, and I appreciate you guys taking a little time to spend with me today. Like Mary Kay mentioned a little earlier, we are in a very unprecedented time. This is a crisis bigger than anything we faced in our careers to date, for most of us. The analysts who are following Brightview are estimating that we have a minimum of a 5% increase in labor coming over the next 12 months for the landscape industry. And that's on top of nearly a 30% increase we've already seen since January 2020. Also, according to a CNBC small business poll, 25% of business owners said their biggest challenge coming into this year is rising costs. And we're facing record inflation for our generation, translating into compressed profit margins and tightening access to capital. There was a recent article published by the NALP that discussed the correlation of the rising labor rates with our insurance premiums. And it's really compounded because the cost of lost times claims are going to be higher than we've ever seen them. And that's on top of the increased overhead that insurance companies are also having to take on. I sent this article off to a client of mine, and I was really shocked with the response I got. They basically just blew it off, said, "So what? Everything's going up." And that really is true, but everything is going up, but how we choose to respond to it is 100% in our control. And therefore, how we come out the other end of this crisis is 100% in our control. Unless, of course, we just take that approach of, so what? There's nothing we can do. Despite record inflation, as far as my generation is concerned, we have never seen inflation this high. In this unprecedented business climate, I'm not going to tell you anything new today. The age-old saying of there's nothing new under the sun is true. In this presentation, I really just hope to unpack some of the proven principles of business and help each of you see what can be possible for you. These are the principles that have been used by some of the top performing companies in the industry to build scalable, sustainable, and profitable businesses, and also the principles that I've used to turn around mediocre businesses and turn them into strong, profitable businesses that have remained profitable through times of growth and times of client attrition. But before I get into those principles, I want to talk about something that's kind of pet peeve of mine, if you will. I want to talk about some of the foundational concerns of starting and building businesses in this industry. I've worked with a lot of business owners in this industry, and I see some of these things overlooked as unimportant. But then down the road, they come back to bite not only the business valuation, but the business owners. So in times of tightening profit margins, every little misstep has the potential of turning into a major negative event. So it's important that you set the foundation of your business so that you're responding from a position of strength. The very basics of business foundations come in the form of written operating agreements with all your partners. Even if you don't have partners, setting up your business with an operating agreement comes in handy down the road. For example, I'm currently working with a client. It's a couple that own their own business. And during the startup phase, they were very loose with all kinds of things, business, personal accounts, etc., lax in the formation documents. And today their business is doing fine, but they're simply trying to get a house. And because everything was commingled in the beginning, it's a really difficult process of explaining everything to the mortgage brokers of, this is a business, these are business transactions, these are personal. So, from that, I've really gained an intimate and understanding of how important the formation of your business and the separation of the business from the personal is. On top of that, written buy-sell agreements should be absolutely a part of your business process, even in family situations where family members are employed by other family members or partners with other family members. More important than having, or just as important as having a buy-sell agreement, is making sure those are funded with the correct funding vehicles. Basic funding of buy-sell agreements are cross-life insurance policies and cross-disability insurance policies. And the most common mistake that I see is underfunding of those liabilities. To illustrate that, I have a client, my firm has a client, not my personal client, but they had a startup, and 5 years in, they're producing $50 million of revenue. They're in growth mode, not the best, growth mode's not the best time to sell this particular type of business for max value. One of the partners was diagnosed with early onset dementia and was unable to participate in business anymore. Basically, they were forced to sell the business in a fire sale because the buy-sell agreements were written in such a way that once he was deemed unable to participate, they had a certain amount of time to execute, and so they were forced to sell the business. Everybody lost. It was really a sad situation that could have been avoided with a little bit of proper planning, contingency planning with their attorneys and their financing partners. Another often overlooked piece of contingency planning is key man insurance and key man compensation plans. You spend a lot of time and resources developing your key people who develop your key clients, and losing them either due to accidents or because you didn't have the right compensation to keep them can be devastating to your business. You're also probably a key employee or the key employee to your business. Your employees are depending on you, your employees' families are depending on you. So developing key man insurance for that purpose for your business is really important. And I'm not going to get into the details of that here, but happy to talk to anyone about it if they're interested. And finally, as you're growing small businesses, there's a ton of risk out there that a lot of people are not aware of. And I think it's very important to develop key relationships with your insurance professionals and financing professionals in the industry. There's some great ones around the Urban Ag Council that can keep you informed of the risks that are being seen out there and coming down the pipeline before they become a major problem and hit your balance sheet. A couple of the ones we're seeing are sharp rises in cyber crimes. For example, if your bank account's hacked today, your bank bears zero liability on that. If someone takes one of your payroll checks, washes it, drains your bank account, bank's not going to fund any of that. That goes back to your insurance, or if you don't have a proper insurance policy for it, it goes back to you. So that's an important one to keep your eye on. Other cyber crimes are, your employees' HR information getting hacked and sold. That can be a very costly loss that, again, if you don't have correct cyber coverage, it's coming back on you. All right, with all that in mind, I like to visualize our businesses from the ground up, understanding that each layer is supported by the one before it. Foundation layer of any solid financial plan, it lays in the protections, guarantees, and systems of the business. And from there, you grow and generate profits from a position of strength, which inherently leads to tax problems. So it's important to set up a team of professionals to help guide your business and your personal financial decisions, and is fundamental to keeping profits you've earned. An often overlooked area of managing a business is not only in small startups and small businesses, but also the larger middle market businesses, is scaling profitably and deploying excess cash. So if you've done all these things well, focused on the details of each of the phases of business that you've built, you're going to be in an excellent position to do whatever it is you want to do with your business. We call this generational legacy planning. And it's important to really start your business with the end in mind. That's how you develop a strong vision and how you finish where it is you want to go. No matter if you're building a family empire with your business or using your business to build a legacy in some other ways, this generational planning of your business from the very beginning can be very beneficial. And no matter what stage of the game you find yourself in today, surrounding yourself with a competent board of directors is very helpful in building a solid business. There's an age-old proverb I like. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go with a team. So that's the end of my foundational business building soapbox. So we'll get now to what I think most of you probably came here to hear me talk about, and that is the principles of success that will help you manage your business through inflationary times and rising cost times. The theme of the rest of the presentation is what is measured is managed. But there's always two sides to a coin. We have to be careful to measure what we will manage. I've seen people spend massive amounts of money measuring things down to the smallest detail, and they're just bogged down in what I call analysis paralysis. We want to make sure we're measuring the impactful areas that we're going to manage. Right now, we're all seeing how quickly prices can change. Most of my clients are getting letters every day from vendors notifying them of upcoming price changes or unavailabilities from the supply chains. We see employees leaving all day, every day. They're leaving for crazy, insane rate increases to other industries or maybe to other competitors. At any rate, we see the prices going up, things becoming unavailable. In this environment, keeping a clear line of sight into our job costs is the most important thing. Having that information updated within 24 hours if possible will provide you the agility to pivot and respond to issues that you see coming on the horizon before they become situations on your balance sheet. One way I've found among my clients to help facilitate that is to develop a best practice with basically a forced planned lead time. I advise no jobs be started within a set lead time from the signing date. This allows you to go from just a just-in-time buyer to more of a strategic buyer, and also the additional planning time tends to reduce the overruns on your job, causing major overtime issues on your P&L. So basically, I have three principles around this topic. The first of these three is job cost management. And the first part of that is labor hour management. In a labor-intensive business, your largest individual cost is your payroll. In the landscape maintenance business, you're probably looking at between 35 and 45% of your cost being labor-related, while on the construction side of the industry, you might only be looking at 20 to 25%. But either way, the labor is the major material number in your cost structure. My three areas of labor cost management to keep control of are who and what are causing your labor issues, yard time or other idle time management, and then benchmarking with labor numbers. You're paying for every hour of clock time, so why are you not charging for every hour? I feel like I've been fighting this fight in my professional career and with my clients now for a long time, with not only owners, but also the sales team. We're paying for every hour, every second that someone's clocked in on our clocks, in most cases, but there seems to be a pushback in charging for all of that time. I found that companies that have done similar to some of the stuff I'm talking about and have really dove deep into the numbers and the details of their labor numbers, I found that they're not really charging for all of their clock time. So what are we managing in labor? Managing labor is as old as history itself, as old as business itself. When I talk to old Valley Crest guys, they have this way of managing labor. It's great. It worked for them for decades, built them a huge company. If you go talk to one of the Brickman guys, they have an entirely different way. But what they both have in common is most of it relies on rules of thumb that have been generated over time and some gut level management assumptions about labor. What I'm seeing in companies that have pulled ahead in the profit game is that they rely on a system, and a system integrated with their time clock, their work tickets, their job cost, and all their labor is job costed, and they manage that from the ticket and routing dispatch system. With real-time clock tracking by employee down to your work ticket, you have an absolute X-ray visibility into your organization's labor costs. And you'll be able to answer the question of who's causing your overtime, whether it's some specific crew with a poorly placed employee or a job that's being performed outside of scope, or you'll be able to answer what's causing your overtime, whether it's equipment breakdowns, parking issues, or drive times. But without that X-ray visibility, I don't know how you can confidently answer these questions. And so it's like fire in the dark when you're trying to control labor costs, much less improve efficiency against historical performances in your bid hours. Another area that anyone who's been in the industry very long knows that they have to manage is yard time or idle time. But the question I ask a lot of people is, do you have a real numbers-based understanding of what yard time and idle time is costing your company? Even if you know approximately how many minutes your guys are in the yard or at the suppliers picking up material, do you really understand what that cost is to your organization? This is just a basic example of what a small 3-man crew costs at various numbers of minutes on the yard. If you look at the middle example, if your crew is clocked in and spends a total of 20 minutes in your yard or 20 minutes of idle time over a day, whatever it is, loading and unloading equipment, material, just whatever, and you're paying them on average loaded rate $18.50 an hour, you're looking at a spend of $9,435 per year per crew. So just scale that across your business, however many crews you have, and you can kind of get a feel for how much money is going out the door to idle time. If you don't understand what that number is, there's not really a good way to make sure you're charging for it. And that's on the pricing side. And if you don't really understand it, there may not be the urgency to improve the efficiency to reduce that number. Average companies that I see are sitting 20 to 25 minutes on this scale, while the best companies I've worked with are below 10 minutes per crew. So that's benchmark number one that you can work with. Speaking of benchmarking, a lot of people I talk about benchmarks to, they just give me a blank stare. They don't know what I'm talking about. So a quick definition of benchmarking that I like to give people. It's the practice of comparing a set of results against an average or a standard. Now, I hear lots of objections from business owners all the time against benchmarking. It's a waste of their time. They don't want to compare themselves to other people, or whatever. There's tons of them. I haven't seen a single successful business that isn't using benchmarking in some way to manage the business. And as a small business, participating in benchmark studies can add a lot of value to you as a business owner to help get a closer and timelier look at what your peers are doing on a blind comparison basis. This helps you become more agile and helps you gain more confidence in your decision making. There are excellent industry benchmark reports out there that can be obtained from organizations like UAC and MALAP. I think you have some, Mary Kay. If you don't, MALAP definitely has some. Also, a lot of the industry consultants like myself have compiled their own benchmarks or have access to other benchmarks that are not publicly available. And when you're working with them, you can certainly ask them about those reports. Some of them are making them publicly available, selling them on their websites, etc. It's good information. But beyond that, within your own company, if you're keeping good, timely, accurate data, you can create benchmarks within your own company, between your divisions and across time. Just comparing today's numbers to last year's numbers is a benchmark. One of the keys in benchmarking is to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So make sure that each category you're comparing against is the same or really similar to the data you're comparing against. So for example, if you're running $1 million in revenue, you don't want to wholesale benchmark yourself against Brightview, who's running billions of dollars in revenue. You want to try to find a way to benchmark yourself against a company that's similar in size, running a similar product mix. I've had personally a lot of success in creating many competitions within our teams just by posting a current actual or current trend of historical versus budget job time. Managers who, really all of our managers, they didn't want to fall below that middle mark on the benchmark report. So they really started taking notice, taking ownership, creating competitions. And every day that somebody beat that middle benchmark or beat the person above them, all the averages would increase. So that's really the beauty of these benchmarking reports, is beating the average raises the average. Next part of job cost management is catalog management. And it's really vital during times of rising costs. And catalog management, less is more. If your catalog's too large, with too many variations, you end up not being able to accomplish any actionable output. You want to be able to understand your buying habits and evaluate what's in your pipeline at all times. And that's the only way you'll be able to successfully make the shift from a just-in-time buyer buying things, immediately when you need them, which subjects you to market fluctuations, to a strategic buyer where you can take advantage of bulk pricing, contracted in pricing, freight discounts, all kinds of good things. And on the topic of becoming a strategic buyer, catalog management, maintaining and tracking bid expirations and lead times allows you to ensure that you're not losing profit margin and last-minute cost increases from your suppliers. According to the last earnings call from Brightview has shortened the expiration date on their proposals to only 15 days. And that might not be feasible with all of you if you're working with general contractors and different things like that. I'm sure Brightview has some contracts that they're not doing that on as well. But with the clients that it is feasible with, definitely residential clients or small commercial clients, having a short bid expiration period and enforcing it can really make a huge impact on your gross profit margins. So that being said, there's not a whole lot of value in a bid expiration policy if you don't have contracts with your suppliers and your vendors that protect your price rates for a set number of days. So for example, even if you have a 15-day expiration, but your suppliers can change their price daily on you, then it doesn't do a whole lot of good. So when I evaluate a business, I always ask about the vendor contracts and help negotiate vendor contracts with terms around price changes. So they have to give us a certain amount of time before they can change their prices on set material. And the final area I see not getting the consideration that it deserves is how you handle delivery and pickup of materials. Much like we talked about earlier, that's why I said on that yard time thing, it's not just yard time, it's also idle time. That's a cost that needs to be measured and managed. You might find that, your yard time cost is so high that it makes sense to hire runners, or, you might find that it makes more sense to pay higher freight charges than to send an entire crew to pick up materials. So basically all that comes down to, you have to have a good, what I call ERP, electronic resource planning system, so that you can have this level of x-ray detail into your labor, your job costs, and that gives you a lot of leeway and agility in your pricing and decision making. And that is the end of principle 1, which is all about direct cost management. So next we're going to look at overhead. In overhead, in our business, only some items can be actively managed and controlled throughout the year. A lot of overhead decisions are made during the planning processes for the year and set for the entire year. Also in our business, overhead rises with revenue, but it doesn't rise in a straight line. So all of your overhead costs, your revenue can rise with overhead remaining flat to a certain point, and then overhead will go up in a straight line. So you have a stepped process. So the key objective in managing overhead is to maximize revenue for any set level of overhead. And then developing a strategic plan to grow rapidly through that next step up is key to pushing to the next level of revenue, so you can absorb that cost and maximize the revenue at that step as quickly as possible. Any areas of overhead that can be controlled by the management on a day-to-day basis should be delegated out to your management team so that they can take direct ownership. Otherwise, if you're just trying to manage direct overhead from the top, it's like beating your head against the wall. Even though it's something that your field managers can help improve on, just telling them, hey, do this, do that, is not as effective at giving them the ownership of that piece of the budget, making them the owner of it. Some of the things that can significantly mitigate costs in the green industry are circled around the insurance and fleet components of your P&L. Safety programs over the last few years have not made a noticeable difference, but they're going to play a major part in this inflationary environment, like we talked about on the first slide with the rising cost of insurance. Insurance companies will be doing everything they can to mitigate their costs. So companies with strong safety programs, strong work, being able to demonstrate strong, safe working practices will be in a far more advantageous position when they're negotiating their insurance premiums, and will get lower insurance premiums. Similar to that, driver training programs. A lot of insurance companies are already mandating these items. They won't even insure some companies if you don't have a driver training program that you can document and demonstrate. To the safety program point, you don't have to come up with your safety programs all on your own. If you're using tools like Exmark mowers, you can get the manufacturer reps to come down and do trainings and document them. That really will serve two purposes for you. It'll document your safety training program for your insurance purposes, but it also documents them for OSHA purposes. If you have an OSHA event, that documentation can really come in handy. Next area that can really be managed well on a day-to-day basis is your fuel usage, and not just the usage of it, but in this environment where we have crazy, insane living costs and fuel prices rising, it's a ripe environment for theft. It's a crime of opportunity. And I keep going back to this ERP comment, but having a fully integrated ERP allows you to track your gallons of fuel usage by crew, by job, etc. Will really give you the ability to see those fluctuations and catch either mismanagement or improprieties or theft. With an area that right now we're looking at $6 a gallon fuel prices could be a major component of your P&L. All right, so also along the idea of fleet repair costs is another area that I've seen across a lot of companies. Depending on how you're managing it, you can pick up major points on your P&L, but I don't mean by deferring maintenance. That's a short-term Band-Aid that will come back to bite you as you come out of the rising cost problem. Really what I'm talking about, and what I see with the highest profitable companies, is investing in structured maintenance programs, regular inspections that are documented through a system. You don't want small things to blow up, which then raises the cost of repairs by as much as 20 to 50%. And having a system in place to monitor your maintenance program can really save a lot of money and avoid those issues. The last point of overhead cost mitigation is to look for services that you can contract out. Sometimes, depending on your size, contracting out your HR could be a lot cheaper than putting someone full-time in your office, and you'll get a higher return on that investment at a lower dollar point. But also contracting some of your services within your office, you can get better pricing on your services. For example, just a quick little example here, I had contracted a shredding company for my office, and they would charge me $45 a visit to come in and empty the shred box, but they could change that price on me at any time. But I negotiated a contract with them for 2 years where they charged me $50 a time to empty the shred box, but they couldn't change the price. And initially that was a $5 more per service issue, except for the fact that today with rising fuel prices, they're charging $75 per drop, and they're still that company's only paying $50 for them to come out and empty their shred box. So that's kind of the power of setting up contracts with your vendors and developing win-win situations. So the final area here of overhead to keep in mind is what's called overhead recovery. And it's really just the practice of making sure we're taking all of our overhead into account when we build our pricing. Making sure we allocate all of our costs across our product mix so that we can price fairly, but at the end of the day, capture all of the costs that go into the business, whether it's insurance, fuel, depreciation, whatever overhead costs we have. For our industry, what I see works best is a very simple percent of cost overhead recovery model. Run that by your in-house bookkeeper, controller, CFO, CPA, whoever you have working with you on your finances. Hopefully they know about it. Can help you develop a simple percentage of cost overhead recovery model. If you're using an ERP system, all the good ones out there have the ability to take that into account for you. It just needs to be set up right. If you're not using that, again, you're making gut decisions on your pricing, and you're probably leaving a lot of margin on the table by not charging for all of your overhead. All right, third principle here. It ties it all together. We've talked a lot about systems, or I've mentioned it a lot. Because without a solid system, none of what we discussed is sustainable in a scaling business. In the discussion of systems, the idea of data integrity is paramount to successful use of data management. My comments on ERP systems are basically in general. I don't endorse right now any ERP systems, but there's some things to keep in mind as you're evaluating systems that can make them more useful and have a higher return on your investment for your business. A lot of ERP systems are written from a very specific standpoint, very specific niche in your industry, in their industry. And so, if you get into one of those and you're in a different industry, it might not work too well for you. Others are written to be more all-encompassing. So depending on your business, you may need a very specific, or general might be better. The point is, spend some time evaluating the systems you're looking at. Keep in mind the foundational issues of your business model, your service model, your customer base, and even your employee base and their level of expertise. Find a system that's scalable and as comprehensive as possible for your business. And then during deployment of a system, one thing is equal across all systems: garbage in, garbage out. And once you get a system, be all in. So to unpack some of that, I'll talk about system alignment. A lot of people tell me, hey, I got this system because, my guys in my peer group swore by it, or my brother's a sales guy for it, whatever, and they're just beating their head against the wall. Those are all bad reasons to buy a system. Systems are not one size fits all, including QuickBooks. There are better accounting systems out there, depending on your business. Take a hard look at the culture of your organization. Another thing I see a lot of times is we got a super sophisticated system. It's not being used. Everyone's frustrated by it. And when you look, the culture of the company just isn't innovative or isn't IT driven. So they need a more basic system than they have spent a ton of money on. And think 5 or 10 years down the road about how it's going to scale with your vision of the business. That's vitally important because the cost of switching systems is around twice the cost of acquiring a new system. Something that's often overlooked in evaluating systems is the ownership structure and strategic objectives of the software that you're evaluating. You want to make sure they're not a turn and burn company, that they're there to support the system. You want to look into their strategies for their system support and development. Very important things. Data integrity. When setting up your system, garbage in, garbage out, we already said that. You want to make sure you're measuring the right things. Like we said earlier, you don't want to spend all your time and resources measuring things you're not going to manage. When you have strong, accurate data that everyone can believe in, your meetings, your management meetings will turn from being emotionally based to numbers driven. You'll find they're more productive, and your teams will actually enjoy coming to meetings more than they did prior. And lastly, be all in. Nothing's more demoralizing to an organization or a bigger waste of dollars than to partially implement or partially use a system. Spend the time to be all in. Gain the buy-in of the entire organization in order to recognize the full potential of the investment. If your company is not on integrated systems today, the process will have a big impact on the business. If you are on systems today and you're just barely using them, moving to fully all-in buy-in of that system will recognize large profit improvements. Not only that though, but you'll begin to see a morale boost around the use of your systems. You're going to see new practices and new workflows come out of implementation of a system. And as you roll that out, it's always easier to enforce 100% of a policy than just 99%.
Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I have a niche business, and so when you were talking about benchmarks, what if there's no benchmarks out there to compare to?
So there's basic business benchmarks, right? That, basically if you are at any level of revenue, there's certain percentages of costs that you need to adhere to in certain areas. Those kinds of benchmarking data is out there. And in my opinion, they transcend all niches. But depending on what your niche is, I'd encourage you to look into that further and challenge it. There's probably is some level of information that you can get to kind of try to develop more specific benchmarks to granular levels, or just network with people in that niche across the country that are not necessarily in your own markets, and try to ask questions. What are you doing about this? And that way you can kind of develop within your own data what you think your benchmarks ought to be. And again, with benchmarks, as you set an average, right, and you achieve it, as you get closer and closer to achieving it, that average is kind of constantly raised, which is going to improve the business.
I understand that. And in my situation, it's more of creating the benchmark. And of course, I do ask around, how are they succeeding? What's your goal or your procedure? And a lot of people are really eager to share that information with them. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Anything else?
Well, if people have questions later, could they email you, Peter?
Yeah, the last slide has all my contact information on it. So just a second, we'll get there. And if you leave it up on the screen long enough for me, take a picture of it.
Okay.
All right. So to sum this all up, basically, we're all in business here to make a profit. We also need to be in the business of protecting that profit. Today, more than ever, with our ever-changing costs, inflation, and all that stuff. It's important to ask questions of your organization or have someone else from outside ask questions. It's key to formulating a solid, actionable plan. Just because we're seeing the worst inflation and most rapidly rising costs of our careers doesn't mean that this is the end of our business. Really, it's just the beginning. If we look at history, all the great things happened at a crisis point. So, in my opinion, we all stand on the shoulders of those who come before us, and the horizon's bright and full of brave new opportunities. One of my mentors says that in the calm, plan for the storm, so that in the storm, we can all be calm. Take the time to make a good plan. Surround yourself with competent advisors to challenge you and your organization, and then go put that plan in action. Measure its success against your goals, make adjustments as necessary, and repeat the process. So, what would it mean to you if you could have certainty about your business? What would it mean to know that what your predicted cash flows were going to be day to day or week to week for many months in advance? And what would it mean to know the profitability of every job that your crew does before they even start it? All these things can be accomplished with business discipline, structure, planning, and the help of an integrated ERP system. So in closing, let me tell you a little bit about my firm. Mary Kay mentioned I'm with Thelen Financial. That's my own firm that I've launched. At Thelen Financial, we're focused on helping our clients achieve profitability and growing top-line revenue. We also work closely with business owners to help them achieve life margin from their business by offering comprehensive profit and tax strategies. Comprehensive being, we understand the deep connections between personal and business finance and how to navigate those similarities and differences for a successful outcome. In our client onboarding process, we start with a 360-degree business evaluation where we're going to identify your organizational culture, your goals, your current systems and processes. We're going to generate a report identifying the gaps and recommending improvements to alleviate any bottlenecks and affect organizational growth and revenues while sustaining and building profits. In addition to that, or to support that, we offer CFO advisory services, which is an ongoing CFO consultant and a business coach to help guide your business to max potential. We offer outsourced administrative services to help eliminate bottlenecks and bring standardization to your back office. And at the risk of sounding like we're trying to be all things to all people, we also offer financial planning services to our business owners and clients and can offer high-level financial coaching to your key staff as a benefit to your employees. And that's the end of everything I have for you today. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you, Mary Kay, for having me. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing all of you at our next networking event.
Make sure if you have other questions or for Peter, give him a call or email him. And we also, Peter, we want to thank you, a new member of the Georgia Urban Ag Council. Thanks for your membership.